Welcome to the Inspiration North podcast, inspiring stories from inspirational people and how they found their passion, their true north. I'm James Eves.
And I'm Michelle Minikin, and this is the Inspiration North podcast.
Today's episode, it's all about understanding your why with Peter Lillie. We talk about having a role where you wake up happy every day, sustainability, performance, and profitability is a scalable model, and how any decision isn't final. You've always got a choice.
Peter has over 25 years in implementing commercial strategies and partnerships for startups and large multinational organisations across Europe. For the last 5 years, he has been active as the co-founder of GRN Sportswear Limited and its co-brand Presca Teamwear, which was formed to show that high performance and sustainability work hand in hand. In that time, Presca and GRN have secured a significant investment, supplied kit to professional cycling teams, been invited to number 10, and received numerous awards for its innovative approach to the performance sportswear market. Peter is a keen cyclist and youth athletics coach with his local team based in Middlesbrough.
So Pete, if we go back to childhood, did you know what you wanted to be when you grew up?
A lot of my childhood was kind of centered around sport. It was the thing I enjoyed the most, I think. So I wanted to be what every boy in my age, in my class, wanted to be, which was a footballer. You know, that was it. It was like, if I did, you know, if I had the skill and the talent, I'd have been there. But apart, there were the two kind of things that were missing, really, in that goal. But I think as I grew up, I kind of always knew what I enjoyed most, and what I enjoyed most was talking to people, having conversations, really, and being able to kind of relate. I guess I would say is that I knew I would never be an academic. You know, I would never be sat in front of a laptop or a computer for any period of time. So it would have to be something where I interacted with people quite a lot. And I think there was always that kind of formulation that it would be something around speaking to people, making sure that I was interacting. The thought of being stuck behind a desk for all my working life was just the opposite of what I would have wanted to be. So I think, you know, as I say, once the dreams of being a professional footballer dissipated, which happened very quickly when you realise, you know, where you are in the world in terms of footballing skills, then it kind of, it then became about how do I find a career that I actually enjoy? And that was, you know, that went from working in a supermarket as an assistant to the assistant manager during college time, to riding around collecting insurance, to on a motorbike in Hemlington, which was always fun, and just trying lots of different things, really. But a lot of that was doing while I was at college, and you know, it was an interesting pathway. But it all stemmed around the same place, which was not being stuck in one place at one time and being able to go out and speak to people.
When you actually think about that, so when you're choosing your next steps, did you go on to further studies, or did you kind of have in mind, because you kind of say to someone, I like talking to people, I don't want to be behind a desk, but when you actually try to narrow down, what actually is that as a career or as a job or as a... Yeah,
it was really interesting, because I think that was one of the reasons why I ended up back at college. So I went to King's Manor School in Acklam in Middlesbrough. Then ended up going to college, but then I left college and went to live in London for a little bit. And I ended up living in a hostel in London for a little while, which was interesting because I shared a room with a roadie who used to come in at 2:00 in the morning very loudly after under the influence of copious substances, and wouldn't be worried about waking us up and telling us about how good the band that he'd just been gigging for, whatever you say, was. So that was an interesting kind of time. And, you know, it's all a learning curve, really. And I think for me, that period, which was only about 8 to 12 months, was really about, do I just want to go into the workplace? Do I just want to go and find a place in London where, you know, the Dick Whittington thing, you know, you can go and find your way, get a job, do whatever you need to do? Or was it a case of, well, actually learning about people, learning and understanding about people and their journeys, if you like. And it was from different places, you know. There was guys over from Ireland, there was guys from Liverpool, there was guys from the North East, so it wasn't mainly a London-based thing, but we were all kind of in one place doing different things at different times, and at different parts of the journey as well. As I say, this roadie spent his life when he wasn't on the road, he'd book himself into these type of hostels and just be there for a period of time, and that was it. I was there because essentially it was what we could afford at the time, so we kind of, what I could afford at the time, so I moved in, did that for a little bit, and then I realised actually I probably need to go back to college and spend some time further and getting a bit more education, understanding a little bit more about what I wanted to do. But it did get you to that point, I think, where you see both sides of the coin. And I think I wouldn't change that for the world, because what it gave me, I think, a lot more of a rounded view on where people come from a little bit. If I'd have stayed in education, which was a strong option at the time, I think it's what my parents would have preferred me to do. It probably would have just taken me down a path that I think you can surround yourself in a little bit of a bubble. And especially, if you follow the standard path, you go to school, sixth form, and then you go on to uni, unless you go and see a little bit of the world, I think it's quite a challenge, because you've still got to go on your learning path and then make a decision on what you want to do. And I think taking time out to understand a little bit more about what you want to do and what your aims are while you're going through that process was a big learning curve for me, certainly.
It's a very good point. I mean, we often talk about this, don't we, where we say you've got to make some pretty important decisions at a time in life when most people, I would say, haven't got a clue. Unless there's a few friends, I think, I admire you because you knew from a young age what you wanted to do, but you almost need to have a mandatory, you leave school at this point and everybody has to spend a year. We'll give you a grant or something.
Bring back national service.
Yeah.
and give a bit of time. So you don't have to be on the treadmill of schooling, and then, do you see what I mean? So you go away, you experience things, and
it's a drop in the ocean, though, isn't it? At the end of the day, you're 18, 19, 20, 21 when you're leaving uni. It's a drop. You've just started, and to try and formulate your life on the back of that, I think, is a real challenge. Some people are very lucky. Some people know that right from the off. I knew the type of area I wanted to be in, but I would in no stretch say I knew exactly the place. And I think that it's a challenge, because the pressure that people are under now, I was saying, my eldest daughter's going through it right now, you've got to make a decision on the right course, and then you look at what their decision criteria are, and it's things like nightlife, it's accommodation, and all the stuff that actually should be. It shouldn't be about, I've got to make a career choice for the rest of my life, because essentially what you're doing is you're proving you can do something, you're proving you can do a degree, which is a pathway to something else. It's not the be all and end all, and I think that's a real kind of an unfair pressure really we put on people, unless they know exactly where they're going to go. To decide that early about the pathway for the rest of your life is, it's a drop in the ocean. You're 18, you can times it by 4.
Even before that, so if you wanted to be, you want to go into medicine, you would have to make sure that you did GCSE, all the sciences, and that's a decision you make when you're 14, 13. It's just nuts, so
completely. The amount of times. And I remember even going back to my school days and my career advice. And I wasn't the best at school, I've a hand up to admit it, and anybody who knows me would say exactly the same thing. So I don't think it's anything to hide. And that was more born around a frustration of I knew I wanted to do something, I just wasn't sure what it was. And the pressure at the time is, when I was at school, was ICI, British Steel, police. Apprenticeship essentially, or then you go to sixth form. So it was no brainer. I was always going to go on to sixth form, but it was kind of okay. Well, what do you want to do there? And I think retrospectively, careers advisors would be very pigeonholed in terms of what you can do. But even now, my daughter went to see my eldest went to see a careers advisor shortly before leaving school, and she's got really good grades in media, and she wants to follow path in media, and that's great. And I think the questions that came through was, well, what does your mum do? Well, she's a clinical lead, she's a health visitor. What does your dad do? Well, he runs his own business. Right, so do you want to do anything that they do then? It's like, well, no, I want to be my own person, doing my own thing,
and
it's
for your self-limiting beliefs.
yeah, exactly, right. And it's like, well, I think trying to understand what options are and the broad range of things that are available to you, and it doesn't, you get a degree, and unless you are uber confident in the way that you want to move your next 5 or 10 years, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that, and it's absolutely the right thing to do for that person. But the expectation, I think, is completely unfair that everybody should know where they want to go, at that time, because I think out of the most successful people I know, those guys at 21 still didn't know what they were going to do. I think some of the most successful people didn't know what they were doing at 26, 27, and then they've gone on to do amazing things. And, I think, as I say, it's a drop in the ocean.
It's interesting you say that, because there was some research recently that said sort of the older you are when you set up your business, the more likelihood you are succeeding.
Well, I think what it does, it's well, because I think you're more assured a little bit, and you're more confident in your own ability, and you're more able to listen as well. I think that's, the thing for me is when we say this, a lot of it is about not being scared to take a risk, but also listen. It's that thing. I think there's a kind of business model where you listen. You've got to understand the why of your business, but then you've got to look at what the marketplace is saying as well. And it's, you can put that. You can kind of look at that personally. You can say, okay, well, I know why I'm doing it, but that doesn't necessarily mean I'm always on the right path. And I think having the ability to listen to other people and their advice and take on board what's good advice, I think maybe there's a maturity that's got to be addressed with that. And that is, that's part and parcel of growing up, isn't it?
It's elusive growing up. I don't know when it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Okay. So taking you back to you as a 21-year-old.
Yeah.
What was the path? Take us through that.
Well, it's been interesting. I mean, I knew essentially at that time that I wanted to go into sales, because it was that thing about being out and about and talking to people, and I enjoyed it. I mean, at the end of the day, there's a kind of golden rule, isn't it? You've got to enjoy what you do. If you don't, what's the point in doing it? So, and what was really apparent for me was that it was a good way to do what I enjoyed doing, and if I was reasonably good at it, earn a decent amount of money as well, And I think it was interesting, that kind of pathway, which was when I started off my first job, and I was fresh out of uni, and thinking you knew everything about everything. I've done a business studies and marketing course, I can rock it, and I know, I come with all these theories. And I went to work at a place called NEP, which was on Lustrum Avenue in Stockton. I remember sitting down in the interview and being ridiculously overconfident in the interview. And looking back at it now, if I was me, I'd have probably kicked me out of the office, but luckily they didn't. And you can't.
We're going to destroy you.
Yeah. And so they probably looked at this kid and were like, okay, well, he might have something, we'll give him a go, And I remember literally the first day I'd gone in, and they used to have these Citroen. Essentially, they were like hearses, basically, but there were Citroen cars that they used to be able to put photocopiers in the back of. And that was the goal, right, to get one of those. That was like, you'd made it if you got one of the big Citroens. And then there was the smaller Citroens, and then there was us, who literally had to pinch lifts with people wherever you go if you wanted to go to meetings and stuff like that. So, and one of the first, I think it was literally in the first week, one of the things that we had to do was go around an industrial estate when it was throwing it down with rain, and knock on the doors, open the door and say, like, hi, I'm Peter from NEP, can I ask you what photocopy you use? And you think about it now, like, somebody came into our office and they would go around, well, I don't know, it's this, that it's there, you can have a look at it. And the goal of the job was to get this little compliment slip, to write down what photocopier it was, take it back, and then put it in a line of when they're going to be looking to replace it. Now, I did that for, I think I was with NEP for probably about 4 years, but as a grounding, it was fantastic, because actually what it taught you is it doesn't matter how much you think you know in theory, the practicalities of a business life are very, very different. You can come out thinking that you're the bee's knees with these qualifications, but actually what it meant is I went down and you are literally a door knocker going in saying, by the way, what photocopy you use. And luckily, because of where we live, 99% of the people were great, and they'd kind of know that the fact, look, you give him a bit of a break, he's a compliment slip, and you do it sort of cyclical, so you go around it different. It's just it's
you again.
Yeah, it was a little bit like that, and
all right, Brenda.
Yeah, literally to that point. But what it did, it gave you almost a grounding of trying to build your own business from the ground up, because essentially that was it. That's what you had, and that's how you had to make And the guy who was my boss at the time, a guy called Tim Price, used to say, like, you run your own business. And I think right from the off, that was my, yeah, you're right. And actually, if I don't do this, you don't earn the money. I mean, it's a real basic kind of thing, but you don't earn the money. So therefore, you've got to go out and do the work. And if you don't do the work, you won't earn the money. If you do the work, you do earn the money. And there's a thing that I kind of say to the guys that, this serendipity and hard work go hand in hand. And it's true. And I've for the last 30 years, it's always been the case that the more you go around and the more literally doors you knock on, the more successful you are. You learn to be a little bit more targeted after the years go by, and a little bit a little bit more grown up as a kind of walking around with a dodgy earring and a really bad suit, sort of saying, "Hello, what type of photocopy do you use?" But it all starts somewhere, and that for me was the basis of that ethos, really, which is, and even then it was like, well, I'm not working down a mine. So it's a level of yeah. It's kind of there's hard and there's hard, right? And to be fair, walking around speaking to people who are decent people who aren't going to give you a load of jip and just ask them for a little bit of paper wasn't a bad job, And at the time it was kind of 80s going into the 90s, so things were just turning round, and it was about that. It was about being able to formulate your own business even from then. Obviously you're doing this the right way, you're doing this the wrong way, but essentially you were running your own business within that business. And I think to me that was the kind of catalyst to say, well, actually I quite like this, and I quite like the responsibility of being able to show what I can do. It comes from a sports background, right? Whereas you know what you've got to do to perform, and to me sport and business are intrinsically linked. It's a kind of thing, and I do think that it has a relevance, and it's just a training plan. It's a glorified training plan of business, and essentially what you've got to do, the bits you've got to place it and work out where you've got to get to on the back of that.
So what changed then for you to move on? Was it a new challenge you were looking for, a different type of product or service?
A lot of it came from word of mouth. So a lot of what would happen was that you do a half decent job somewhere, and somebody would say, okay, I like what you're doing, do you fancy coming over here and having a go there? So a lot of the times what would happen is that somebody you'd know, it's a networking thing, right? Somebody you'd know would move to another company and say, would you like to come over here and come work there? I kind of moved to a lot of different companies, moving over for kind of like 2-year periods, really. It was like growth phases and moving on and up the pay scale as you do. But what I found was really interesting is that NEP was a smaller company. It was run by 4 guys that were based out in the northeast, and they'd taken it. It was a dealership. I then went to work at a larger company based out of it was actually Comcast, and that is now at NTL, that is now Virgin, I think. But anyway, did that for a little bit, and then went to work for a bigger organisation, which was a company called PTC, and that was a brutal 2 or 3 years, which was very, very much based on, you will sell this, you will do that, you will do, and that was it. That was interesting in itself, because you realise that sometimes a culture of a company has an effect on the type of people that they employ. And I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing, but I think what it gave me in terms of my learnings, from then to now, is that if you put an imprint on a company that you've got to react in a certain way, that will attract a certain type of person. And whether you like that type of person or not, they have a mold. And that was a real kind of interesting learning curve, I think. But again, it was almost that self-regulation that I enjoyed. What I didn't enjoy, to be honest, from that pursuit was the culture of the company, and it's not something that it's nothing to do with them. It was just for me. It was more. It didn't fit into the way I like to work, I think. Yeah. And so then it was a case of, from there, I decided to look at smaller companies that I could have a bigger impact on, I think. And that's probably for 15, 16 years what I spent time doing, which is working in smaller startups where you can go and affect the company, you can formulate your own plan, you can develop things, and it was all about learning. It was all about that grounding, that kind of initial, I guess, 10-year grounding taught me a lot. Rightly or wrongly, I made a lot of huge mistakes, but I also learned quite a lot, and part of those mistakes were all part of the learning curve, and it was really interesting. But I think what it does, it gives you, it helped formulate an appetite for what the type of business you want it to be, whether you want it to be a large conglomerate, whether it wants to be smaller, and actually then you get to again regulate yourself. And so for a period of time I went to 15, 16 years I went to work back for startups, which was great. Because at one point, you're the only person in that organisation in an area the size it was Europe, to say, right, you've got to go make an impression. You've got to be the person that would sell that product first into that environment. And it was a tech-based environment, so it would be, you were a 15-man organisation trying to sell into a Vodafone or a 3 or an O2, for example. And I still boil it back down to the first thing, it's that thing of, well, am I actually walking around a cold industrial estate getting soaked through the skin? No. Well, then if that's where I put, I'm not doing that. I'm just talking to people. And if I believe enough in the product when I'm talking to people, actually, whether it's up to me to show them the quality of what we do and the scope of what we do. If you understand, if you believe, if you kind of have confidence in what you're doing and the product you're selling, it doesn't matter the size of the organisation, the size of your organisation. It's just about finding the niche and find where you fit in and showing that you can make enough of a difference within that organisation to affect it. Yeah.
Yeah, there might be just a few more hoops to jump through, or a couple more decision makers, or a bit longer selling process. But otherwise, it's.
But that's about structure. At the end of the day, everything to me is about defining a structure to work to. It doesn't matter whether you're a multi-million-pound organisation or you're two people working out of out of your backyard. If you have an aim and you have a goal for that aim and you believe your why enough, you believe while you're doing it, well, the rest is a map and it's a strategy, and you should be able to move or change that strategy as you want. But as long as you've got that structure to go to, and you can always revert back to your why you're doing it in the first place. And if your kind of belief in that is strong enough, then actually the rest will formulate, because mistakes will be made. But that's up to you to be as flexible as you can in understanding the reasons for that, and then moving it along and changing it. And it's a learning curve. Every day is a school day, isn't it? So you've got to learn, and if you can react to those learnings and make your business more flexible because of that and stronger because of that, then that's a good thing.
So that was, you said, 15 to 16 years in smaller businesses, but then you made a move back into a larger structure, didn't you?
Yeah, that was Oracle, which was a big old beast. So yeah, the situation where
So what was that like? Because small structure, you've got a bit more flexibility, you can do things how you want, and then you're back into something that's more hierarchical. And
yeah, it was strange. It was. So the reason I moved into Oracle was because a friend of mine had gone over to run that section kind of globally, and he wanted somebody to come in to run UK, Ireland, and Israel, and kind of look at that as a section. What was interesting about that is that the way it was positioned, it was a business within a business. So we were fairly self-autonomous, and we could do what we wanted to do, in inverted commas. But I mean what became interesting about Oracle, and they were very good guys in Oracle, and I wouldn't say anything against them. I think it's just whether it was a fit. And what I found relatively quickly, I was there for a period of time, but it was the type of work that it was. What was really nice was the structure around it. So pay, holidays, all the good stuff that comes around with working with a big company. And what you find out when you're working in a smaller business is that's not something that you get. You quite regularly will go, in a smaller business, where's my next paycheck coming from? Is there enough to make the business survive? Are we going to be in it? And that's a day-to-day conversation, or a month-to-month conversation normally. With Oracle, that's obviously never the case. It's that's a fairly big structure. You're well looked after, but it comes to a point, and there's a crux of that where you look at it and go, "Is this what I want to do? Personally, is this what I want to do?" Forget the finances, forget everything else on the back of that. Is waking up every day doing this job making me happy? And the truth was, it kind of flipped, and it wasn't. It was what it was doing. It was a means to an end. So I was relying on other things to kind of fill that void, if you like. Yep. So what happens is that you would do your day job, tick that box, and then fill your stuff with other stuff going on, just because that kind of void on the day-to-day run was there. And it's nothing against Oracle was a brilliant company to work for, and for the right person, it's a fantastic company. Yep. For me, it didn't really fit that well. And so it was a conversation that I had with my wife, and kind of went, look, this isn't really me. And my wife being myself said, fine, okay, well, let's look at something else. I'd met Rob, whose original idea GRN was, and Guy, and started having conversations with them. They knew my background. We'd had and then it was a case of, well, how do we develop that idea into something that could be full time, into a real business proposition? And so I kind of spent time. The last 6 months I was at Oracle developing that and working with them on that and saying, okay, well, if we were commercializing this is what it should look like. And we agreed between us a kind of way forward. And then Rob and I started formulating this plan about, right, well, we should maybe look at do this full time. And I was kind of more and more veering towards this is what it needs to be, really, to get to where we need to be.
Yes.
And then we'd I think we'd 50-60% agreed that that's what we were going to do. And then New Year's Eve 2018, we had a few drinks, as you do. And then I woke up on New Year's Day and just said to my wife, look, I think we should do this. And she was like, I said, the good news and bad news. I said, the good news is that I think we should do it. The bad news is that means you might have to go back and work full time for a couple of years. And she was great with it and said, yeah, well, you've had to do it. It wasn't really a question of whether you should. It's like, I know you, I know what your mind's up, and therefore it's not really a question. It's something you're going to have to do. It's something you're going to have to do. And having that kind of green light was brilliant, because it just means, okay, now every decision we make, and when it does get tough, and running your own business and doing what we're doing here does get really, it can be challenging. You can go down where you've got next to nothing in the bank, and you go, okay, is this where we should be? But then what happens is your why comes in. This whole thing we're talking about, the why of the business, and actually when it does that, and it's only really happened once, that time where we said, okay, well, is that, and we went back to the why, and we went back to the why do we do what we do, and then again it's a no-brainer, and then it's just resetting, and that actually was a catalyst to saying, right, well, we need to go out and get finance, we need to go out and get the investment to deliver what we said we were going to deliver in the first place, which was the world's most sustainable sportswear company. And at the time in 2014 it was like, really? But now, as you can see, what's coming on now is that everybody, and we're quite happy about it, because it means everybody's trying to make a difference. But more people are getting on board. 5 years ago it was still seen as a bit of a left field thing. And pre-investment, the truth is there was times when there was just us. There was Rob, Guy, Christine, and going, okay, what's, like, we're running down, what do we do? But we all had that core kind of belief in what we did, in the why of the company, if you like, and I think that's made a huge difference in terms of the confidence we had. But also you flip that back to your personal life, and if your family's behind you, and they're kind of going, yeah, it's all right, we know you got it, then it makes that decision a lot easier.
It does, and it becomes the fuel, doesn't it, in the harder times. I suppose it's Steve Jobs is often quoted, isn't he, about working on your passion and your why, and that the reason that entrepreneurs can can keep going is that you keep going back to a why, a passion, and that if you didn't have that, you would actually give up the ghost on a venture, and I'll do something else. But because there is that's what keeps you going. It's like, I might not get paid this month, but we'll figure something out. I'll keep going. I'll keep plugging away.
What's interesting, and it does go back that why a little bit, that I heard a story the other day that there was this guy had been doing an education thing. It was a business teaching session, and he did one in Apple, who had the iPod, the original iPod, and he also did another teaching session with these guys who created a product called Zoom, which essentially was the equivalent to the iPod. And he said that there was this whole kind of ethos around Apple, as it was about, what do you do? What's your why? And it was about design. They knew that everything they do had to be designed beautifully. And he'd gone back to this guy who designed the Zoom, and theirs was all about function. So yeah, design versus function. But what they were doing kind of Me Too technology. So essentially they were doing Apple, but Apple Plus type of thing. So yeah, it's an Apple, it's got this, but we like Apple, and we've got all these additional features as well. And he said that he'd go to these two conferences, and he was presenting at the conferences, and he was asking them too about the why of the business. And he said that all the guys who had Zoom were talking about beating Apple. Their goal of the business was to beat Apple. Apple was to design beautiful things. So they had their way, and essentially the whole way of the Zoom company was to beat Apple. Apple was to design beautiful things. And he said he was in a taxi with one of the senior guys from Apple, and they were driving back after he'd just done this presentation. And he said, I couldn't resist. And he said, you do know this Zoom is a way better product than yours. It's got so many more features than yours. And he said, the Apple just turned around and went, no doubt.
It's not as pretty though, is it?
Yeah.
And he didn't stress, and he was like, I know, but that's not our why. Our why is we design things beautifully. So you're probably right. It has all these features, has all things, but I'm not worried about that because my goal is here. And, then you see the Zoom died, I don't know, 12, 18 months later, and Apple is where it is. iPod is where it is. But it's that kind of, that ability to have a confidence in your business and understand where it is. And, you have challenges, of course you do. And as a management team, we have challenges all the time. But we all revert back to that central point where we all agree why we're in business in the first place. And I think that for us is one of the key factors. And you talk to any of these guys out in working in the offices next door, and they'll say exactly the same. They understand why we're here, and they're all bought into that process. That's why they work at 8 o'clock on a Friday, and Rosie's out at whatever time it is on a Saturday, and none of it is us saying you must do this, because we don't set stipulations, we don't set working hours. It's up to them, and as long as they produce, that's fine.
Yep.
And they all do over and above, and it's great because they get why they're here, and they get the why of the business, and they're bought into that, and that is so much more than the skill sets that they bring with them. This is about their buy into our process, and we're blessed with the team we've got, but we're blessed with the team we've got because they get it and they've bought into it. And we have a session on a Monday morning, actually, just before we started this, and we close it. It's Chatham House rules. We say, look, it doesn't matter. It's a linear thing. This, and we'll just all pile in and have conversations about where we are and what we're doing. And what's really apparent in all those meetings, it all comes back to the same point of them understanding what we're doing and them wanting it to be successful. I don't think I've ever been in one of these sessions where it's come from the wrong place in terms of they're saying, why is everybody on me? I don't want to do this now, and push back. It's all about how can we improve things? How can we make things better? And it self-regulates itself. I think as soon as they get the why, those guys self-regulate themselves and kind of almost own that, talked about age about owning your own business within the business, and they do that. They self-regulate. They have their ownership of their own hours and do what they need to do. It's great.
So do you want to tell our listeners, I mean, I said viewers, they're not viewing anything, thank God. Do you want to tell our viewers, listeners, Michelle, what your why is? Why do you exist? The business, not you.
Yeah, I was going to say that's an existential question for a Monday morning. Let me go back to okay. Yeah, I need a couch for that one. Yeah. So for us, the whole part of the business was to say why sustainability, to show that sustainability and performance can work hand in hand. So what that means, it's not just a kind of glib statement. It's about almost changing the mindset. Now, interestingly, in the 5 years we've been doing this, that's a fairly acceptable thing to do now. In 2014, it kind of wasn't. It was, look, you can have one or the other, and it was seen as being very much a left field thing. And actually, one of the reasons why we changed the kind of branding in the business from GRN to Presca was because we kind of took it as read that everybody would understand our why, that this is a very performant product that is sustainable, and we've worked really hard to get it to market. Yeah. But what we realised is this thing about understanding why, but the messaging and the branding was not quite there. And that was because we were very, the GRN branding was a little bit, I know fat face aren't listening, but it was a little bit fat facey in terms of it was very rounded and wasn't quite as performance led as we want it to be. And I don't think that that's just a realization. So GRN was green essentially. It was, the idea was it talks about sustainability. What we found is that the core message about the performance was slightly getting lost. But that didn't change our why of the business. We still knew that was the why. We just had to change the messaging to the public to say it's actually both. Yeah. And that's about the balance. So yeah, I think that the why of the business hasn't changed and won't change, because we're all bought into that. And Rob, my business partner, is very, very keen on trying to establish that to the next level, and that's there's a standard we're looking for, which is a B Corp standard, which is working on in the background at the moment, which is about getting sustainability right the way through the business, and putting that stamp there. We kind of, and without being too grandiose, we tried to change the game in 2014. We tried to say, look, you can make performance clothing out of sustainable materials, performance sportswear, and at the time there's sort of 3 or 4 materials available, and now there's up over 50. And that shows that there's a drive in the marketplace to do that. I think where we are a slight advantage is that we've been doing it for 5 years, where other people are still going through the learning curve. And we're still the only company set up purely to look at sustainable teamwear. There's a lot of teamwear companies now looking at sustainability, which is great. But that was our why, and I think that helps us. That helps us kind of, I'll fight for it a little bit, where it's probably the too strong a word to use, but that helps us drive the business forward.
Almost, you've got the first business stake at the top of Mount Everest, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think for us it's about continuing that message. It's about making sure that what we do is at the forefront of the industry, because I think if we don't, it's almost like admitting that, okay, we could only take it so far, and I don't think there's a limit on where we can take the company in terms of the entire message, but also where it can go. We've got the pro cycling team wearing it this year, and they were the most sustainable pro cycling team. We had the world's first most sustainable skin suit. We've won a couple of awards along the way, which is great. But I think that the trick is not to rest on your laurels, remembering the why you're in business at first, and it was to push the boundaries. It was to make sure that actually there are places that sustainability and performance can go, and we need to be making sure that we're at the front of that.
Yeah, because it's easy to stay with the success that you've had, but then everyone else is trying to catch up to that standard, aren't they? So if you're not continually moving, eventually you're overtaken. Yeah,
completely. And I think for us, it's a mixture of two things. It's the impact we have commercially and environmentally. That obviously the environment is absolutely key. But I think the only way you can manifest that model is to show that it can be profitable as well, because otherwise companies won't take it on, and that for us is the key. It's look, we know performance and sustainability is going to work, and now we want to show that profit aligns with that as well, because actually that's the only way you change the marketplace. I mean, we don't want to be a really good idea, we are a good business. So that means we've got to show that model and generate that model and be ahead of the game. And I think you kind of have that triumphant of sustainability, performance and profitability, and if we get those three right, that kind of diagram,
the Venn diagram.
That's exactly what it is, right? That kind of Venn diagram, and say in between is us, is our standard. Then great, then that shows that we can take that model and grow it and show it's a scalable model. And for us, that's what that's the key.
One thing I love is is it on average 7 plastic bottles?
Yeah. And that, the thing is that's great, and that shows that we can make good quality products out of recyclable material. The key is what's next, right? So we've done that, and now other people are going, oh look, you can do that. That's great. Let's do a Me Too thing and let's copy it. So what we've got to do now is say, okay, that's great, and look at the development of the business and make sure that has a footprint. And I don't want, for me, every sports bit of kit should be made from recycled material. There's no reason why not. There genuinely is no reason why not. It performs just as well. It comes from a better place. Why wouldn't you? Right? And so if we can affect that marketplace, then absolutely we should. And then you look how do you take that as a whole and look at the next bit. Because it will go, what essentially you've got to do is you've got to show that material. I mean, it's a supply and demand thing as well, isn't it? Right? The more people buy that material, the less it will cost. So it will cost less. Therefore, it become more the standard than it will. The virgin materials, which are a bit of a nightmare in terms of where they come from, etc. So it's a mixture of kind of, as I say, performance, sustainability, and commercialization. And if you get that model right, it's about expanding that, and it's about saying, okay, that should be the standard, not a one-off line, but everybody's got to start somewhere.
Okay, if we had to take you back to 18-year-old Peter,
yeah,
what advice would you give to him?
Lose the earring.
How long did the earring stay in?
Oh, I don't even want to talk about it. It's
looking very pretty now, though.
Yeah, thank you very much. Along with the pirate's eye patch and everything else that went along with that. Yeah, I think it would be about don't doubt so much. You know, like there's an external pressure to make your mind up quickly, and I genuinely believe that. I believe that the best ideas come from hard work and kind of an imagination and an ability to kind of look at everything through different eyes.
Yeah.
And I think that's great, and it all but you have to have the confidence in yourself to go with what you believe in. What's most important is the ability to be able to not worry so much about a decision. I think when you were kind of, I remember that, you know, my dad was an engineer and he worked at British Steel, and he had a job in British Steel for 45, 50 years. My brother was, he went to be a CEO of a company in South Africa. And, you know, I remember one of the reasons I went to London in the first place when I was a kid is that he said, just come down, just try it. And bless them, my parents were horrified, you know, but my brother said, just come down, give it a go. And I kind of said at the time, well, I was more worried about what my parents would think than actually the doing of living in I said, well, you know. And in the end, I remember having a phone call from my mum and dad, and my dad going, I'm really proud of what you're doing. And I was like, really? I thought you wanted it. And he's like, no, it's good that you're doing that. And it's almost kind of that, the ability to do it anyway. And I think the advice I would give the younger me was don't worry about it, just do it, you know. And because there's time to make up for whatever happens. There's time to start a business, whatever age you are. There's time to make mistakes, and there's time to breathe. You know, give yourself time to breathe, because it's all not part of this kind of treadmill. And if you give yourself time to jump off the treadmill, actually you'll enjoy it a lot more.
Yeah.
And I think you've got, you know, to me, it's a bit of advice I give anyone, is that any decision isn't final. You've always got a choice, you know. Whatever you have in life is a choice, and there may be two bad choices, and you can do that, but it doesn't matter. It's still a choice.
The least worst.
Yeah, the least worst choice. But at the end of the day, it's still a choice. And I think, you know, the one bit of advice I would give is look, take time to make the choice, and don't worry whatever choice it is, you know, because it'll be 99 times out of 100 it'll be all right. And that 1% it isn't, then actually it will. It'll always be okay, because we'll find a way of working it. And I think it's all about that kind of mental attitude and being able to kind of self-regulate enough not to panic and to give yourself time to breathe.
That's great advice. I think even to 40-year-old people too. Okay, so if somebody has listened and really, really likes the sound of you guys, how's the best way to get in touch?
Well, if they want to speak to me directly, normally they can get in touch via the website. So Pete at grnbikewear.com or at prescateamwear.com. Anything they want to know more about our products is at prescateamwear.com and grn. Sportswear.com. And then if they want to reach out to me directly, then I'm on LinkedIn, so please have a look for me.
Awesome.
Well, it's been a great sunny day in Middlesbrough. We've enjoyed
as always.
meeting. It's always sunny when we come to Middlesbrough.
It's weird, isn't it?
We've enjoyed meeting the team again at the Presca Teamwear office. The coffee's
Presca
always
Towers.
Presca Towers, and the solid coffee. It's
and we're buzzing all day.
yeah, one coffee is all you need.
Yep.
But it's been great. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks everyone for listening. Check out all the show notes at inspirationnorth.com. Join us again for the next episode, when we'll be chatting to another inspirational person. If you like this, subscribe and tell your friends. If you didn't like this, subscribe anyway.
And tell everybody.